everybody, it's Uncle Reddit. Welcome to an episode of Malicious Compliance, where people get exactly what they ask for. Please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Our next post comes to us from You Bailey the Nerd. I mean, if you want to be at work an extra 3 hours. Back in my retail days, I was working at a certain large blue and yellow electronics store selling phones. My department had an unofficial rule: don't start any new cell phone transactions half hour before closing. This was for two reasons. One, the support we had for the phone carrier was East Coast time and generally closed an hour before the store closed. Two, I don't know if anybody here has bought a cell phone on a contract, but that can take forever if something goes wrong. My general manager openly hated this rule. He got his bonus off of customer surveys, and anytime a customer left even mildly dissatisfied, he'd have a very mild heart attack. So obviously, last-minute customers being told, "Sorry, we can't do that," are generally pretty grumpy. After a year of working there, I ended up as the most senior person in the department, and certainly the one with the most knowledge about his inner functions. I was also almost always the closer. On to the malicious compliance. My general manager was badgering me every night for months about helping customers after our usual half-hour cutoff. Normally I'd just deny him and explain that if he wanted them to be taken care of right then, he could do it himself. He'd back off. He has no idea how to sell a phone, and when he's tried, he's screwed it up. This particular night, I saw a large family walking in, beelining toward my department at 8:45 p.m. We closed at 9. I was in a capricious mood and decided this would be the night that my general manager would stop bugging me. The family rolls up, I give them the spiel. "Sorry, we can't do any activations after 8:30, blah blah blah." They look sad and start to head back out. And right on cue, my general manager walks up to them, chats for a bit, then starts heading to me for my nightly, "Oh, come on, can't you help them? I know it's late." Me: "You know what, general manager? I'll take care of them. You're closing up the doors, right? It might run a little late." General manager: "Yep, I'm closing the store tonight." Perfect. I chatted with this particular family the other day. They didn't speak English that well. They were porting in from like 3 different prepaid carriers, and the company they were trying to open an account for is known for being the worst. So I start the transaction. By 9:30, there's major problems. 2 of the ports aren't going through because I was given the wrong info for the port. Everything's going to crap. I look at my manager, I smile, he smiles back. He doesn't know how bad everything's going. Around 10 p.m. he's checking his watch. He's getting antsy. It's just me, him, and the customers in the store. At 10:30 he asks me how much longer I'm going to be. I answer, "I don't know," and explain everything that's going wrong. He asks if I can call that company's account support. Lol, they closed 3 hours ago. 11 p.m. rolls around. He's just sitting on a counter across the store, alternating between effing around on his phone and staring at me. 11:30 rolls by. He looks visibly upset. Keep in mind, this is a man with the same personality as drywall. Seeing any emotion on his face is rare. We hit midnight. I've somehow fixed one of the port errors. Most everything else is still screwed beyond my abilities without calling the carrier. General manager: "Hey OP, is this going to be much longer? Maybe we should call it a night." Me: "Yeah, to be entirely honest, there's nothing I could have done for them as soon as things started going wrong. I've spent the last 2 hours fixing problems I had no business even attempting to fix. And somehow I've made some minute progress. However, I know customer satisfaction is important to you, and I'm willing to stay the 5 more hours I'd need to get this even kind of working for them." General manager: "Okay, tell them to come back tomorrow and we'll finish up." Me: "By the way, we haven't even been able to finalize the purchase for the phones, so they can't take the new ones, and the ports that did work means that their old phones don't work. So you're gonna have to tell them that their phones aren't gonna work tonight." General manager: ... Me: "Sure wish there was some way we could have avoided starting a process like this with no possibility for support from the carrier. They could have made quick work of this. Too long didn't read. Manager thinks it's more important to take care of the customer, even if it's impossible to do so, than it is to make sure employees can leave after the store closes." Edit: forgot to throw in the ending. It's pretty generic, so apologies in advance. The GM never questioned me about the half-hour rule from that point on, and made a point of coming to me whenever cell phone/carrier questions were brought up. Which was honestly a long time coming because I trained my department manager assistant manager, and 9 associates how to do the cell phone stuff before I left. Shortly after that, he'd also stopped trying to help in our section by taking customers there and trying to do our jobs when we weren't looking. I swear I had to kick him out of our section for months before he finally realized he was out of his depth with their cellular crap. Our next story comes to us from You Incognito. Okay, buddy, we're going to do exactly what you want. Sorry, bit of a long one. My friend and I were walking our dogs through a huge off-leash park in our town that's kind of wilderness-y, with crisscrossing streams and several bridges. We walked to the bridge that leads out of the park, then turned around and headed back in. Our dogs were running around playing with each other, and there was a man and woman coming towards us with 2 adult dogs and a puppy. The puppy was on leash, but the woman let him off as they approached us. This puppy loved our 2 dogs and wanted to play, so we stood still for a bit, as did the other 2 people, and then my friend and I started to walk away. The puppy stayed with our dogs, so we kept glancing over our shoulders to make sure we didn't get too far from his person. Clearly, we were the only ones concerned about that though, because the other 2 people just walked away in the opposite direction without a glance back, call, or anything. My friend and I stopped walking again to make sure not to increase the distance, but they never looked back. It's really wooded there, so it was tough to see them, but eventually we could see they were standing on the bridge out of the park. So we turned back and walked towards them to bring their dog back. We could see they were standing about a quarter of the way along the bridge, talking to some other people, so my friend called out, "Hey, can you get your dog?" several times, but they ignored her. We ended up walking all the way to the bridge to get their dog back to them, where my friend told them to put it back on the leash so it wouldn't follow us, but they still ignored her and kept talking. We gave up and turned around and walked away again, and no surprise, the puppy followed us again. We got too far away for comfort again, so turned back a second time and called to these people again to get their dog. This time the guy yelled at us, "Quit worrying about it and walk your dogs, we'll figure it out." I mean, it should have been clear to them at this point that their puppy was nowhere near them and following us, and that we doubled back twice to try and return it, but he told us off for trying to help, so we just said, "Okay buddy, you bet," and went back to our walk. I mean, if I'm being totally honest, we might have say doubled our original walking pace, but still doing what we were told. Once we got out of sight, I guess these stellar pet owners started to worry a bit, because the guy actually started to call the puppy, but that didn't work, and we're still walking. Eventually, we were far enough away and out of sight that the guy started running in our direction, still calling the puppy, which was still playing with our dogs and totally ignoring him. We were still power walking away, just not worrying about it, just like he told us. A couple of extra details. This guy was in no kind of shape, and the ground is covered in fresh snow, so super slippery and hard to run in. So now he's trying to run to catch up, still calling the puppy, and we can hear some pretty labored breathing. Unfortunately for him, my friend and I have now reached the steep uphill portion of the dog park, and we're not slowing down. Puppy is still having a blast with our dogs. Now the guy is shouting various reasons that this is not his fault, like it's not his dog, he's just trying to catch it for his friend, or that he didn't hear us before, to which we call back, "Okay," and keep walking away, because we're unclear on how any of that would be relevant, given that he shouted at us to quit worrying and walk our dogs. Now he's almost caught up, but he's wheezing and panting and red in the face, trying to catch a super hyper puppy that's running full tilt around us and having no difficulty dodging him, and we're still walking. But eventually we decided we weren't enjoying having a wheezing, shouting, panting shadow. Also some concern he was about to have a heart attack. So I scooped up the puppy and handed it to him. To be fair to him, he was quite grateful at that point, which is fair since we were only doing exactly what he told us to do. Our next story comes to us from You Brave New World. I wanted to be salaried, you wanted me to be hourly. Okay then. I applied to a full-time opening at a company, but for reasons, they wanted to bring me in as a contractor for a while until a different position opened. I would be reporting to Joe in a department I didn't really care for, but it was alright as a temporary situation. Well, it turns out Joe was a reasonably nice person, but not such a great project manager. He staked his role at the company on our team delivering a certain major project on time. The problem was that a series of miscalculations meant we weren't able to even start working on it until halfway through the implementation phase. As schedules slipped and upper management expressed their disappointment, Joe became much less pleasant to be around. He yelled at good people for no reason, had a terrible attitude, and generally made life miserable for everyone in our workroom. Now, I was the sole contractor in a department full of salaried employees. Early on, Joe would all but push me out the door as my time card rolled over from 39.9 to 40 hours. as his budget has zero room for paying me for 41 hours a week. Even worse, that would pay the same as 41.5 hours because I was subject to time and a half overtime rules. As crunch time turned into death march, Joe made announcements like, "No one's going home until this is done," and scheduled to have breakfast and supper brought into the office every day. I asked Joe if this included me, and he said yes, of course, and he was surprised I had the nerve to ask. Okay then. It almost killed us. There was shouting and literally tears. We were all near breaking point. Well, most of us. I was in a great mood. As rough and emotionally fraught as it was, we got the project done. We were heroes. And as Sunday dinner at our desks came and went, Joe thanked me in particular for my great attitude. "OP, I really appreciate your hard work with a smile during this tough time." That's when I reminded him, "Hey, I clocked in an extra 61 hours of overtime this week. I'm thrilled I could help." Joe darn near had a stroke, and I found myself standing outside waiting for my bus like 2 minutes later. He was peeved, but couldn't really say anything because I had asked him if I had to stay, and he explicitly told me that I did. It worked out great for everyone in the long term, blown budget or not. Joe looked good for getting the project done. The CEO liked my can-do attitude and transferred me into a full-time dream job. And that paycheck? Getting paid Silicon Valley hourly rates for 131.5 hours, 40 plus 61 times 1.5, bought a very nice vacation for my family. Thanks, Joe. I'm available to work all-nighters anytime you want to pay for them. Our next story comes to us from You, the Worst to Come. You can't have facial hair growing past your lips. Okay then. So this isn't my story, but my father's. My dad is now a retired police officer, which he did for 30 years. Over the years, he has worked patrol, undercover, as a detective, and as part of a DEA task force back in the 90s. About 5 years ago, he transferred to the local sheriff's department, and once again returned to being a regular patrol officer. If you don't know or live outside the US, sheriffs are elected as part of a local election. During the 2018 election, our local sheriff had reached the maximum terms he could serve, leading to an open election. The one who ended up winning was a person my dad was not the biggest fan of. Prior to his election, officers could have a mustache and goatee as long as it's well kept and not too long. But one of the first things that was changed was the facial hair policy. The new policy said that facial hair could not be grown past the edge of your lips, but it forgot one piece of the original policy that was important: the length. So here's what my dad did to peeve off his new boss. He started growing a handlebar mustache. It didn't grow past his lips, but it was long enough that he could shape it with beard wax into a handlebar that was frankly huge. The ends reached to his ears when he didn't put wax in it. Well, this policy change didn't just change my dad. Many of the officers had goatees and were already a bit annoyed with the new boss. So about another 10 officers decided to join my dad in growing out handlebar mustaches as well. In a department of 25 officers, almost half were rocking handlebar mustaches while going on patrol. Eventually, the new sheriff decided that the handlebar mustaches were getting out of hand, and finally relented and reinstated the old policy. My dad had grown this out for about 2 months, and I watched him quite literally cry when he shaved it. But he got his favorite facial hair to be allowed again. Our last story comes to us from You Cheesy Llama. My dad becoming a sub for the hospital he works at. As the title shows, it's a story about my dad that happened 2 to 3 years ago. To clarify, both my parents are doctors in hospitals in small rural parts of my country. Yes, hospitals. One is a normal one, the other one is a psychiatric one. Because of that, they are the only specialists in their respective domains in the radius of about 80 kilometers. So if they want some free time, they need to specify it long before, like even 2 to 3 months for a day off. Basically, we were planning our next vacations a year before so the hospitals can get subs in time. Now we did as always. In September, they had specified when they want their 2 free weeks. Hotels were chosen and paid, etc., etc. Almost a year later, not even a week before my dad came like a zombie home, the hospital HR told him they didn't find a sub. So because of this special case, which is not special according to a friend who's a lawyer, he had to stay at work for 1 more week and join us later. We were completely bummed because of that, but we weren't going to be outdone by that. My dad brought the entire code of the hospital home, and we looked everywhere to find something that would let us take our dad with us. Nothing until my mother started laughing at the table and she showed us something. She found out about a certain clause under which, when the special case line was used, the worker was treated and most importantly paid as the sub. That basically means that you can dictate your pay as long as it's in the for such specialists. That means 7 to 1500 euros for a day of work. Double that if you're on call, then double that if it happens to be a Sunday. That's why subs were never allowed to be on call. Cue the malicious compliance. My dad took every possible on-call duty for the entire week, which he was forced to work. The numbers stacked fast since one of these days was a Sunday on-call. My dad said that he was never more delighted when he knocked on the director's door to tell him how much he was owed. They completely forgot about that rule, and the director could only stamp and sign approved, all the while making the gaping fish face. It came to almost 30,000 euros for a week's worth of work. Too long didn't read. HR forgets about a rule and makes my father work on his free time. Got paid 3 months of work for just a week. Holy cow, I'd like somebody to do that for me. Alright everyone, I hope you're having a great day and that you've enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe. And keep a lookout for more of these little gems from Reddit. So long!